All right now, so let's take the second part of writing a literature review. And this one's going to be a little more focused on some skills and some techniques and just some tips that I wanted to offer you regarding writing the actual document, the actual literature review. Now, there's no one tried and true method for doing this. We each take a little bit different approach when we're doing this, but the key is to not try to do this just one time. This is a process that's built over time in terms of learning how to read, extrapolate information, organize information, present it in your own words, synthesizing it, which means we take several different perspectives of this information and we put it together and try to explain it. The one thing I like to tell students is if you read 5 articles on the topic of your choice, and I asked you to sit across from me and I asked you to tell me what you learned from those articles, we would just have a conversation and you would say, well, I found in 2 of the articles that A, B, C, and happened, but however, there's another perspective over here. So we would just have this conversation. This is essentially what you're doing with a literature review. You're actually sitting across from somebody, physically not going to be there, but you're telling them what you've learned from reading this literature. And it needs to be in your words, and it needs to be written academically, and it's going to need to be organized, and it's going to have to flow. So there's a lot of steps to this, but as you're learning to do this, and I've been doing this for many years and I still learn every time I do this. So it's an ongoing process. So this is just a brief tips and techniques, suggestions, and things to be aware of as you're beginning to write a literature review. Okay, so we're going to take a moment and we're actually going to look at the purposes for this particular topic. And it's the skills in reading for and writing a literature review. So what I want you to be able to do at the end of this is to describe how to go about doing a literature review, and then describe characteristics of what a good literature review is going to look like. Where and how to search for information. So as social workers, we actually have a variety of resources that we can pull from to locate empirical evidence in the literature. And remember last time we talked about empirical evidence, and empirical evidence is the reporting of original research studies. So there's 4 categories that we can pull this information from, and the first one is journal articles, the second one is search tools, the third one is government sources, and then there's some other sources that we can do that with. When we talk about journal articles, there's a number of professional journals that are published that publish articles that report research findings and report the empirical studies. These are actually now going to be pretty much found all online. There are still hard copy journals that are still mailed out to a certain extent. Many of these have gone to where they're actually providing them in an online format. It used to be years ago you would subscribe to a particular journal. I used to subscribe to Gerontological Society, either monthly or quarterly or how often it was published. You would receive a hard copy in the mail, so it'd be like this little magazine, but then it would have all the different studies included in that. Now you actually go to the library, you go online, you do the search like we talked about before in the library tutorial. You look at those different academic databases and then you pull articles from there. Sometimes students get confused, especially students coming into the program now and have just recently been out of high school, because you physically have never held a journal in your hand, but we still call them journal articles, but actually they're online articles and they're housed in online journals, and you're accessing them through the library web bases. You also have government resources. There's a great deal of information that's gathered and analyzed and available through the various branches of government. These are actually going to have at the end of them on the web, they'll have .gov. So if you're looking at a .gov, anything that's a .gov, you're going to actually be looking at government sources. Government sources are really good resources for current statistical information or some type of comparative statistical information on the population you're looking at. There can be criminal justice in there. There can be the substance abuse nationwide. There can be a variety of things. But government sources are generally good for statistical information. You really have to dig down into them because some of them are hard to read. You're not wanting to get to the fact sheets. Sometimes you'll get a fact sheet and it's just bullet statements of the different information. The issue with that is that's a secondary source and we've already talked a little bit about secondary sources and the problems with those. And many times there's no citations on there, so you don't know where the facts came from. Best to go to those original data sources, whether it be the census, whether it be domestic violence reports through the Attorney General office. This is all pretty much public information, and if you know how to access it, then it's available to you. And again, these sources are very good for if you're needing monetary information, statistical information. You want to find something that's a .gov. Other sources would include things like the think tank, and some of these are the RAND Corporation, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Kaiser Family Foundation. These are think tanks, and so what they are is they actually spend a lot of time doing different research studies or supporting different research studies in areas that they're very interested in. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation does a lot in the nursing field. Kaiser Family Foundation does a lot in healthcare. RAND Corporation has a variety. So these are good sources to find quality research studies. But then you want to also be careful because there could be a lack of objectivity here because they have some bias in them. They actually maybe steer towards a certain concept, and so the research is going to be there to fuel that particular concept. Great source of information. You just have to be a little bit more critical in the analysis of it to pick up on any potential bias, and specifically in their methodologies or anything that could be hidden within there. Mission-driving organizations also sponsor or report on research, and these are your .orgs, your .org, or your not-for-profit ones that you could look at. They're going to include National Diabetic Foundation, American Heart Association, AARP, some of those. So they may sponsor some research, and then you can also get some sources from there outside of the specific journal articles. Once you manage identifying those sources or the resources that you can access out there, you're going to be obviously bombarded with a plethora of massive information. So you're going to have to develop skills in locating what you need and then learning how to manage that, storing and managing the information that you're going to be using. Because if you can come up with a way to do this that works for you, that's not too time intensive, that can expedite the process for you, and it's kind of a hit and miss at the beginning as you're learning how to do this, but it'll help you in writing that final paper. It'll make a better paper down the road. So the one thing that you're going to want to be able to do along the way and at the beginning is building a bibliography or the listings, the citations that are going to go on your resource page. Just a note here, the difference between a bibliography and a resource page. A bibliography is a list of available information, publications on a specific topic. The resource page, or the reference page as it's called in APA, actually contains everything that you've cited in your paper. So your reference page in APA must match the citations in your paper. Everything you've cited within the context of your paper must be listed on your reference page. So your reference page is very specific to your paper, where you may be building a bibliography and not use all those resources. Either way, you actually need a way to capture this information from the very beginning so that you're going to be able to go back and build that reference page at the end of writing your paper. And I will tell you from experience that sometimes I get lax on my system and I don't capture all the necessary information I'm going to need for that reference, and then when it comes time to actually put it in my reference page, I got to waste time going back to find where I got that original source from. If you can develop a system for doing this from the beginning, it will make it easier when it's time to do the reference page. You're going to need a way to collect the author's names, and typically I just collect the last name of the first author when I'm using it as a bibliography so that I can go back and pick it up. Title of the book, if you're using a book, if it's an edited book, you have to have the title of the chapter and the pages that are in that. You need the journal title if this is coming from a empirically based journal. You need the relevant page numbers, the journal number, the month of publication, year of publication, publisher. Again, look at your APA manual and how you need to cite specific sources, and this is the information you're going to need to collect. If you can create a way to do that at the very beginning and then build that as you go, it's going to keep you from scrambling at the end to make sure you have all the information. You want to spend your time wisely and not waste it trying to relocate it. Okay, the book is going to reference 3 ways to actually be able to organize this massive amount of information. And they talk about a preview, and they talk about an overview, and they talk about an in view. And what I present is very similar to that. I just don't use those exact terms. But the preview, you first look at information to determine if this article or this source would be helpful in defining your topic. And that's the information that you want to look at. What's the title of the article? Read that abstract. Does the methodology, does the sample, does the purpose of the study fit in with what you're needing in terms to inform your topic? You want to make sure that you, in previewing an article, that you find those that are published within the last 10 years. Then turn to the findings and discussion section and then see what the results were of that study. So this is the meat of what you're needing to inform your literature review. Don't waste time reading the introduction and the literature review. At this point, don't waste time reading the methodology. At this point, don't waste time reading the results, which is the statistical analysis. Look at that beginning part, the abstract, the title, the year of publication, and then turn back to your findings and your conclusions to see if this is going to line up and inform the topic you're doing. So I kind of put the preview and the overview together when I'm doing this. And then again, once you've selected several or most of your articles that you know are going to inform your literature review, it's at that point you can go back and you can look at those more in-depth areas to get a better understanding of the study that was done. The book also talks about developing a theoretical framework. And you do this, the more you write literature reviews and the more you write academic papers, this becomes more of a natural process. But in the beginning, we tend to want to actually find a theory and then use that theory in our literature review. And you really don't do that. That's not what we do at graduate school at all. So you have an understanding of different human development theories. That's your foundation, that's your basic concept. And so you know those concepts within that. So you begin to organize your literature review and your paper from this theoretical framework. Theoretical framework is going to consist of the key concepts, interpretations, approaches, claims, principles, all of that you have in your mind from the theoretical frameworks that you know. And it may not be just one. You may be pulling from a variety of different ones. But the theories in your head tell you how variables can relate to each other. So how does childhood sexual abuse relate to adult relationships? There's human theories, there's various theories that describe the concepts and the findings from this. So this is in our head. What we don't do in a literature review is name those theories. It's rare for you to find that in a published article where it actually talks about a theory, but just know that from a theoretical framework, you're using those concepts to help you organize the information that you're going to be presenting in your literature review. This aspect of it is really for you as the author of the study. It's to be able to make sense of what your question is, what your research approach is, what variables you're identifying and how you analyze these, and how you explain your research to others. It's not necessarily you telling somebody, I used Skinner's behavioral theory to do this. Part of what we know, it's our knowledge, and then we use it inherently to build this. So then it comes to how you're going to organize the actual literature review and how you're going to write it. And here I say there's as many ways to do this as there is writers in the world, and that's because we all develop our own little unique styles and our own techniques within the required framework for producing a literature review. That's what makes it ours. What I'm going to provide here is going to be, again, some tips and techniques, but it doesn't mean it's an exhaustive or an exact way to do it. It's just some suggestions and some thoughts as you're moving forward. Hopefully in our discussion this week, I posted it, and I want us all to share the way we do literature reviews or the way we gather information or how we organize those citations so that we all can have a dialogue and learn from each other. Again, each of us is going to develop our own techniques for writing a body of literature that's complex and involves synthesizing information into a new whole. Synthesizing is what we're looking for. What I'm looking for is that you're going to read however many articles you need to read to gain an understanding of the topic, and then be able to sit down through your paper and tell me what you know about that topic. What are the comparisons in terms of different populations? What have we found from the research? What are those subtopics under that? So then I get a good idea of your topic based on what you've presented to me. How do we do this? First, you're going to need a way to organize your resources and keep up with the information necessary to include in citations, both in text and reference page. And as I talked about earlier, if you can develop a system for this, then you're going to save a lot of time when it comes to making sure your citations are accurate and that you have all the information you need. Second, you're going to need a way to capture the important aspects of each of the pieces of literature that you're incorporating into the paper so you can write it in the future. So you're going to need to be able to have a way to capture those concepts, those details, so that you don't have to go back and reread the article every single time, so that you know what the highlights of it are and what's important from it. And third, you're going to need a way to write, rewrite, edit, and complete a final paper. So when we're talking about organizing our references, our resources and the articles or the whatever we're using, there's two choices. We can use hard copies or we can do it electronically. And I've met people who just are 100% both ways and some who mix it up. If you're a hard copy kind of person, then you actually want to have the physical copies of whatever the literature is that you're going to be incorporating, whether it be journal articles or whether it be statistics from a government website. So you're going to actually have to print off and organize hard copies of information. That's perfectly fine. Lots of people prefer this. They prefer making notes on it, highlighting it, and having it there. But you need to have a way to do that, to organize it, to make sure that you have access to it all the time, because you may be working on this at school, you may be working on this at home, you may be working on it at your break at your employer or your field agency, whatever that looks like. So you might want a portable file folder or something where you can organize your information either by author's last name, so you could alphabetize it by that, you could categorize it by the concepts that you're using, whatever that looks like. But you need a way to do that. If you're using electronic, and I recommend using a cloud storage if you're using electronic and not a flash or thumb drive. If you're using a flash or a thumb drive, they will corrupt and they'll fail, and you'll lose everything that you have stored on there. So you might need to work on a paper at the library and you forgot your flash drive at home, and so your information's at home, you don't have it with you. That's another downside of using an actual hard piece of technology. So you want to make sure that you have something that's not going to fail. Now you can use a flash drive if you're comfortable with that, but I recommend, again, backing it up in some form of cloud storage. And there's cloud storage that is typically free or low cost. You have a lot of storage in it, so you can actually download your articles and save them in there. You don't have to print them off hard copy. So those are options for you. Some of those electronic sources would include Microsoft OneDrive. If you actually have Microsoft 365, you have OneDrive. There's Google Drive. It's free. I've used Google Drive for years and never had a problem with it. It syncs to all my different computers, which means if I work on it on my laptop at work and I save it and then I come home and open my PC at home, then it syncs with that because I have Google Drive also on my PC at home. That's wonderful. And you can share, if you're working on a group project, you can share back and forth in real time. Dropbox also does the same thing. There's others that are becoming available all the time so that you would have access to these. Positives here, again, you can access them from anywhere, from any computer. Even if I'm at the library and Google Drive is not saved to the computer, I can log in through the web. I can go to Google Drive through the web, log in, and all my storage is right there. The data's backed up. I'm going to say it's 98% safe and not being lost. Nothing's ever 100%, especially in modern times when we have hackers and we have people who do ransomware and go in and try to, do things like that. I can knock on wood and say I've actually never lost anything when I've used Google Drive, or I use Simplicity also, and that's through the university. And plus, again, you can share files in the working groups. So an electronic source is a good way of organizing information for all of your classes. You can have folders for all of your different classes. You can also use an Excel spreadsheet. It's an excellent source for organizing resources, and so if you use your citation, you put your information in your Excel spreadsheet, you can actually go over, you can put the main concepts from there. It will act as a database, and you can sort, you can find, you can search, all of that in there, and that Excel spreadsheet can then be uploaded into one of the electronic sources. So these are just suggestions for ways for you to organize the information, because it's a lot of information you have to organize when you start writing that literature review. However you choose, however you manage that large amount of information that you'll be collecting, reading, analyzing, synthesizing. You just need a consistent system that works for you. And sometimes you may need to try more than one system until you figure it out. But that's why each of us have our own little ways of doing it. You're going to have to find out what's going to be best for you. Capturing the key information out of those articles, and again, the key findings, the key outcomes of the studies, the citation information, the same way, just kind of like I mentioned the Excel spreadsheet where you could expand on your citation to include those key concepts. You know, the same thing can happen. You can use it in a Word document, in a table format. You can include your author and all your citation information and then key concepts there, so you know what key concepts go with what article. You can use hard copy and you can use note cards. I did that for years. That was one of the easiest ways for me to do it, is put the citation on a note card and then record those key concepts and then organize the note cards alphabetically, and then I just copied them from there into my resource page. So that worked very well for me. Again, creating the Excel documents, using them in one of the cloud storages. This second step should be relatively easy to accomplish and merge with the first step if you got the first step organized really well, which is capturing that citation information for those references. In this step, also too, to just make a note, in this step, as you're pulling information out of your articles that's important and making notation of them, whether you're doing it by hand or whether you're actually entering it into a Word document or an Excel document so you'll have it when you start writing your paper, it's okay to use the content word for word at this stage. But recognize that you're using the content word for word at this stage, because when it comes time to write your paper, you need to paraphrase. You do not use content word for word. You are putting the information into your words and explaining it in a new way, not the way the author said it. And then you provide citations as to where the information came from. Even though it's paraphrased, even though it's your own words, you still have to provide citations, because it's not knowledge you generated yourself. It's knowledge you have read and then you're reporting back. So that's important if this is the way you're going to do it. And I do it this way. I will pull stuff out and write it word for word, the contents word for word from the source that it came from. But I note that. I make sure that I know when I go back and start to write that that's not my words, that's somebody else's. And I need to understand that concept enough that I can present it in my own words. Then you get to writing the final paper. If your first step and your second step are logical, organized in a way, the third step is much easier, because you have your reference information, you have the important concepts and the concepts taken from each of those references, and you can now begin to organize your paper by topic. How you organize your paper is up to you, but it must be organized. So you can actually organize it by topic and subtopics. It can be organized chronologically. Sometimes if there's a historical comparison, you may do a series from the 1980s, the 1990s, the 2000s, wherever we're at now. You can organize it that way. Some literature reviews are organized by study design, so they may have qualitative studies presented first and quantitative studies presented second. That theoretical framework that's in your head about the concepts and the variables that you're going to be studying and that you're building this literature review for informs how you're going to organize the information. So this is internal to you. This is how you figure this out. But it's important to have organization and to have subcomponents of it. You can also use the first step and the second step as a working outline, and this is what I do. I start to organize because I use electronic sources and I can move things around fairly easily. Then I look at the different topics, the subtopics I'm going to be using, because I've learned these from the literature I've read. Then I go back and I include the different article citations under a subtopic. Then I include the important content from those articles under that citation, under that subtopic. So I'm building this working outline, and then when it comes time to actually write the paper, it's just a matter of going back and looking at my organization, looking at my notes, looking at the content, and then writing the paper, and it flows very easily. Again, this is just some suggestions on how to do it. There's a variety of ways to do this, but what I will tell you is in doing a complex paper like a review of the literature that's going to have various topics and subtopics, needs to organize, need to flow, you really do need to use an outline It will improve your paper and decrease your time and your frustration by 100% if you use an outline. However you want to build that outline, you need to use an outline. So just some do's and don'ts in your academic literature review. Do not write in first person. That is, you just do not write in first person. And it's very rare in social work that you should be writing in first person to begin with. You leave it out. You're telling a story and it's not about you, so you don't write in first person. Do not use direct quotes, and do not use content word for word from your sources. If you use direct quotes, the information is unoriginal. It's not your own. You're just simply cutting and pasting, in essence, from the article into your literature review. You've not plagiarized. It's a direct quote. You've cited it. However, it's unoriginal information. I can't grade the author who published that. I need to grade you on your work. If you use content word for word and you don't cite it as a direct quote, that is plagiarizing. We just don't do that. Do not use slang or informal language nor contractions. Again, this is an academic paper. It's a professional paper. It needs to be presented in that way. If you're writing a literature review for a research study, there's portions of it that are going to be published, so it needs to be presented in this way. So watch the language. Go back and edit. We all write like we talk. Trust me, I've had people tell me that many times before. So we all write like we talk, so we actually have to learn to have a voice in our head that's writing as a writer and not as the way we talk. Get other people to read it if that's necessary, to get them to edit out those colloquials we use, or those slang terms that we use, or that informal language. Do use transition sentences between your topics and your subtopics. Take the reader, help the reader flow through that. Do provide in-text citations for all the information, and an in-text citation refers to the sentence directly preceding it, not the paragraph preceding it. So you can't write a whole paragraph of information, put a citation at the end, and that citation is substantial for that paragraph. That's not the way it works in APA. So a literature review is going to be chocked full of citations. It is information you're taking from other sources. It's not information you're generating on your own. So you've got to be able to cite all of those sources. And what I can tell you is you need to write every day. You need to spend some time writing every day, because this is how you improve not only your writing skills, but problem solving, critical thinking, increase your vocabulary. Right now you're in school, you're in classes, and I know you have writing assignments. You need to set aside a little bit of time every day and do some writing. This is truly how you develop the skills, and you're going to need these skills as you move through the academic program and as you move into professional practice. The foundation of social work is documentation, and being able to document in an objective, clear, concise manner and support our observations with evidence is the core of being able to help our clients get the services they need and ensure that we're providing services for them that are going to benefit them. Even though you may never write another literature review once you graduate, I promise you these skills that you're learning now will improve your documentation skills and will improve your overall social work skills as you become a master's level practitioner. Have a great rest of the week. This is an exciting week for me because I do like writing literature reviews. I've worked very hard to develop writing skills. I have a little story about how I made an F on that, but I like sharing what I've learned. So hopefully we'll have a very interactive week, and then we'll be able to build on this for our next week. Have a great afternoon.